Each letter is a story. It's a memory in time, captured through a story in the person's words.
It's amazing how there was this camaraderie at the post office, wasn't it?
It felt like Postman Pat, actually, just driving around in a van, around the farms,
It's too good of a building to just be forgotten about.
It powered the final leg of the Industrial Revolution, served the nation through 2 world wars, and was a lifeline for those with loved ones on the other side of the world. Though it served the community for close to a century, Dewsbury Central Post Office on Wakefield Old Road now sits empty with an uncertain future. The legacy and memories of this historic building, however, can never be forgotten. My name's Ruby Jones, and you're listening to Post, Present and Future Destination Dewsbury. This 5-part podcast series is part of the Post Office Cultures Project and is dedicated to exploring the history of the beating heart of a historic West Yorkshire town, told through the voices of those who call it home one letter at a time. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Post, Present and Future Destination Dewsbury with me, Ruby Jones. In the last episode, we heard from Supriya Nagarajan, who told us the fascinating story of how she ended up here in Dewsbury. In this episode, we'll be doing something slightly different by exploring the parts of the post office that us general members of the public never get to see. These are the countless hours spent by posties and Royal Mail staff, making sure that all our important letters and parcels end up in the hands of those who need them. For this episode, I spoke to someone who was delivering letters across West Yorkshire right when Dewsbury Central Post Office was in full swing, and has also written books about the quirkier and more quaint aspects of life as a British postie.
I'm Kevin Boniface, and I'm a postman at Huddersfield Delivery Office, and I've been there for too long.
Take us back to the beginning. How did you first become a postie? Where did it all start?
Well, I actually started at Home Firth when I left school initially, and so that would have been the late 80s. I think I'm quite unusual. I mean, you'll have to check with my colleagues, but I think I did actually have an ambition to be a postman from a very young age. I just always liked the idea of just wandering around, having carte blanche sort of thing, to just go wherever you kind of wanted. Or that's how it seemed to me anyway. So that's what I did when I left school.
It must have been a sort of idyllic place to get started as a postie, to be delivering stuff at Home Firth. It must have been lovely.
Yeah, it was, yeah. That's where I grew up anyway, so
right.
I suppose I probably took it for granted then. I had quite a nice round, actually. It was up at Aid Edge. It felt like Postman Pat, actually, just driving around in a van, around the farms, Just remember there was one farmer who had a cow in his front room. He'd knock on the door and it literally was, he'd be sat there having his breakfast with a cow stood next to him. Yeah, you don't get that so much in Huddersfield, really.
No, that must be something of a rarity these days.
Yeah.
What was Royal Mail and the Postal Service like at this time? I mean, what year are we sort of roughly talking at this point?
That'll have been the late 80s when I was at Home Firth, and it was quite different then. I mean, obviously the parcels and it was a lot more letters based. You'd just have 3 or 4 bags full of mail. The parcels tended to be taken care of with a van guy. Well, we had 2 deliveries in those days. I mean, and early starts. I mean, I used to start at 4:30 in the morning and I'd be done for 11:30. But yeah, I'd come back about 10 and then you'd have another delivery to do. So you went round twice. I mean, the second one was, you'd have 3 or 4 bags of mail for your first one, but you'd have like 2 or 3 bundles of mail for your second. So you'd cover the same route, but it was a lot quicker. And then home to bed at 11:30. Now I'm working pretty much 9 to 5,
Yeah.
The beauty of that in those days, and there was a lot of people like me who either had other jobs or sort of hobbies, that there was a lot of that sort of, it was that sort of job then. A lot of people were in bands and, did other things, or just went fishing, or, there was a lot of hobbyists who were postmen in those days. And it was kind of quite a nice little environment to sort of you'd find out all sorts of stuff. And there was always somebody who would know the answer to something, whatever. And quite handy, if you need some tiling done or a carpet laying, you can usually find someone in work who can sort you out,
Yeah. You've got to tell me about some of these other characters you worked with, just in the sense that you're saying there were a lot of artists, there were a lot of people that had other trades and things like that. Are there any that stick out in your mind?
A lot of people were in bands. I was in a band, and one of my other band members was a postman as well. I'd say I used to go to bed when I finished work at half 11, and then I'd basically get up and I used to drive the van, so I'd go and pick everyone up, and then we'd go and do a gig somewhere, and I'd be the last one home. So I'd come home at about sort of 2 a.m. and have 2 hours kip again, and then be in work, and that was how that worked. Yeah, it's kind of antisocial hours.
Bit of a rock and roll lifestyle there of a
Well,
Postie
kind
in
of
the
rock
early
and roll,
days.
yeah. But then you'd be doing this really kind of mundane day job, you know. It's like, so it wasn't that rock. It was sort of rock and roll.
Yeah.
So we were all right.
Yeah, but like you say, it must have been crazy. Sort of finish your gig at 11 p.m. 6 hours later, you know, you're delivering a letter to a guy who's having breakfast with his cow in his front room.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly the sort of thing my books are about. Yeah, that juxtaposition between just the absurd nature of it a lot of the time.
And it's a very English thing, that, isn't it, as well? It seems to be a sort of quaintly British thing, doesn't it? That, that we can live these lifestyles where you outwardly, you know, on a night you're this rock star, and then the next morning, here's your post, have a nice day, how you doing, sort of thing, and just carry on with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What were post offices like at that time as well? Were there these massive hives of activity, and, you know, people going in and out? Were they sort of focal points of people's daily lives? Or?
Actual post offices or delivery rather than delivery offices?
Yeah, so, you know, or either or, you know.
They were busier because they were more of just like any other high street shop sort of place, you know. It's all gone online, hasn't it, now? But you'd leave bags at post offices as well, so you'd kind of always call in and collect mail from there. I mean, I remember when I started at Huddersfield, which would have been the late 90s, I couldn't believe how chaotic it seemed. I mean, it was a much bigger office, obviously, so that was a bit of a change. There's some interesting characters who were quite loud and made the atmosphere. It could be, if you're in a good mood, it was good fun, and you could kind of. There's a lot of singing actually. As busier it gets, still now, the louder it gets. Because I think my theory is that you get more stressed and you kind of let rip a bit more. But there's certain people who kind of lead the entire shop floor in song some days, you know. And when you first walk in, I think as an outsider, it can seem quite eccentric and chaotic and a little bit mad, which it is, I think, in a good way. I don't want to say anything too incriminating, but it's quite difficult not to.
So you sort of touched on it briefly, so we're going for sort of the home birthdays, for an example. What was a typical day like? You know, how would a day go?
Luckily, I didn't live far from the office, so I could kind of fall out of bed, really, and so I'd get up at 4 and I'd be at work for past. And then there was a night shift in those days. That's something else that's changed. We don't have that anymore. So most of the primary sorting would have been done by then. By the time I got into work, there might be one more wagon that had come in. On the whole, most of that had been done, so you were basically just prepping your own deliveries. And you used to go out then in those days you'd work in sections, so there'd be 4 or 5, 6 of you, and one van driver, say 4 postmen on foot. You work as a team and you get those 5 deliveries prepped and get it all in the van. And then the driver would kind of, so I was on the Honley section for quite a long time, so you'd drive out to Honley and he'd drop your various postmen off at the starts of their deliveries, and then he'd go and drop all the next bags off at post offices and where have you, and then you'd do your delivery. They were these old Sherpa vans, if you remember them. They were LDV Sherpas, but they had like a bulkhead door that was like a sliding door behind the driver to separate the driver from the load space.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But we all used to sit in the load space. There was this little, I guess it was a handle, it was just a hole drilled in the bulkhead door, so you could sort of slide it. But it worked as a pinhole camera, so it kind of projected the road onto the back doors of the van, upside down. So you could kind of tell where you were, even though you were sat in the dark in the back of a van, as long as you realised you were upside down, obviously. But yeah, no, and then you do that delivery, and then the driver would go and do he'd do all the parcels and the firms, but then usually I'd end up having to catch a bus back, and then you'd kind of have another delivery, and I'm not sure how we used to do that whether we'd go out again. It's a long time ago now, and then that'd be it. You'd go home, go to bed, and then get up again at tea time. The beauty of it in those days was, you know, you'd have time in the afternoons and evenings to do other things, you know. Anyway, glory days.
So you touched on it there, but do you have any like really funny moments that stick out when you sort of think about your time and your career? Are there any sort of, like you were saying, the cow for breakfast and all that? Are there any other hilarious ones that stick out to you that you always sort of tell people as anecdotes?
There's a guy I used to work on nights on the night shift at Huddersfield, and he worked nights. That was it. And I used to go in on a push bike. I used to leave my boots at work, kind of in the office, just tucked away under this, where I thought, it was kind of an out-of-the-way sort of place. So I'd ride in on my bike in my trainers and get to work, put my boots on, and then at the end of the day I'd swap them over and ride home again and leave my boots. Anyway, it turned out, after I'd been doing this for about 2 years, that this guy on nights had been using my boots at night, using my boots on his night shift. So basically, we were both wearing them. It was rumoured that one of the reasons he was on nights was because he'd frighten the customers if he was customer-facing, because he didn't seem the most hygienic of characters. So another one involving him, he once reversed his car into his own van in the yard at work. He reversed his car into his van and scuffed the paint on his car. It was a white car, and he found a tub of white Dulux in the stores at work and just painted his car with it. I don't know whether it lasted that well, but
so obviously when you started, I'm presuming everything was still done by hand, in terms of sorting things.
It certainly. Well, in our office it was. At Home Firth, definitely it was. In Huddersfield, they did have the coding machines were on the top floor. They had, so it's like Larry Grayson's. That's dating me, that is, the reference there. But the Generation game where you'd have a conveyor belt, but it was all like mail coming past, and every time, you'd read, I never worked on this, but I saw them doing it, but basically the mail went past, and you'd read the address, and you'd type the code in, the postcode in, and then the machine had so it's like a little row of orange dots on the envelope, so that could be read by the machines then. So that was the extent of the mechanisation at Huddersfield. But that's all gone now, so there's nothing mechanised about Huddersfield anymore. It's actually less mechanised now.
So like you say, that's like the very sort of early days of computing and things like that, isn't it? Like very, very, very primitive compared with what we've got now. One of the stories I heard someone told me about that sort of system was that there are machines now that can sort of just read the labels and kind of sort through it. But some people's handwriting is so bad that we still need people to check the addresses and envelopes.
Well, and people's the addresses. There's so many badly addressed items of mail, and you still do need that local knowledge to decipher it sometimes. There was a guy who took funny stories. Another guy of mine that I know, Pete Robinson, he used to have a customer who every year you get a letter, a Christmas card addressed to the house 3 doors up from the pub or something with the green curtains, and he'd get that every year, but he knew exactly who it was. And one time I gave it him, I said, "Do you know who that is?" And he was like, yeah, but she's got blue curtains now. So you kind of still need that. That depth of, and most, some of the knowledge that postmen have, pretty impressive, when they've been doing around for a long time, So.
Yeah, 100%. And we, sort of up in Dewsbury, we had the same Postie pretty much for 20 years. All the time we lived there, and we sort of got to know him a little bit. He lived round the corner, and you kind of felt that sense of community from it, in a nice way. And that was very nice.
Definitely. I think that's something that's really. It's kind of sad that that's on the wane, I think. I'm on a round that I've done I've only been on it a couple of years, this one, but even in that time, you kind of get to know everyone. You get to know everyone's, you're just part of the community, like you're saying. It's kind of nice,
What would you say are some, common misconceptions about what you do and about the industry and all those sorts of things?
I was going to say that wearing shorts all year round, but I don't think it's a misconception. Actually.
No, that's true. The Postie we had for 20 years was religiously in shorts. It's only for there to be ice on the pavement, and he'd still come up in his shorts.
This is the problem, I think, when you've got this, I hasten to call it a race to the bottom among the couriers, and since but it's this chucking stuff over walls and throwing things on, and leaving stuff out in the rain and things. And I think when you were part of the community, and to an extent we still are, especially Royal Mail, I think you wouldn't want to do that because you kind of know these people. You want to look after the stuff for them, you know.
Yeah, I suppose you build a relationship with them, don't you? To the point where it's like, well, you know that if you know, say chucked it over the fence in the rain or something, you'd see that person again, wouldn't you?
Well, exactly.
The very next day. Whereas these other courier companies, that doesn't happen, does it? A lot of the time. That was another question I had. Do you think the role of the postie as we know it today is in danger thanks to, I'll name them so you don't have to, thanks to Amazon and Every and all these other companies? Do you think the role of the postie and that community sense and all that is in danger?
I do, and I think it's a real shame. I don't know whether it'll work itself out. I don't know. I hope it will. But the competition sort of, as far as I can tell, it hasn't particularly improved the service. It's made it worse. And there isn't that community stuff, cohesion as much as there used to be. Well, I was talking to a friend about this the other night, and he was saying the problem with when you order as a customer, especially now, you're ordering something online, so you're the customer, but you don't have any say over which courier is delivering it particularly. That kind of market force on the couriers and the mail isn't really being exerted properly, is it? The retailers or whoever are the ones who are basically looking after their margins and picking the cheapest option. So I don't know whether there's a bit of a problem there, because it does feel like we're just getting cursory kind of service, or if that's the right word, sort of just doesn't seem to be as thorough. I'm very disappointed, I must say.
Yeah, well, like you say, I think as a consumer, it's not having the choice that is the problem, isn't it? Like it's that thing of needing something as well, and that's the other problem, isn't it? Because, for example, with Amazon, they've got Amazon Prime and all that sort of thing, and they've got so many warehouses, you know, they've got so many staff, they've got so many vans that say if something breaks, say if you need, I don't know, if you need a new electric kettle, you need one for tomorrow, you've got people coming over, and then you click on Amazon, deliver next day by 9 a.m.
Yeah.
They will do that. You know, but at what cost? You know, that's the thing, isn't it? But at what? By gaining that, we're losing all these other things as well. You know, we're losing.
Yeah, but no, thanks.
No, thanks very much. Yeah. I really enjoyed chatting with Kevin, especially talking about the lack of choice regarding who delivers our precious parcels these days. After serving Dewsbury for over 90 years, Dewsbury Central Post Office closed its doors for good in 1998, and to this day has an uncertain future. In the final episode of this series, we will be discussing the wider Post Office Cultures project, as well as the potential future of this historic building. This podcast was produced as part of the Post Office Cultures project. The interviewee was Kevin Boniface, with editing and post-production from myself, Ruby Jones. Thanks so much for listening.